Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. A lot of happenings ever since, the Dateline NBC show was on Friday night. So many new questions have come out about the Idaho 4 case, of course, Bryan Kohberger. So many questions, but some answers, but mostly questions in regards to what is going on and what is the new evidence revealed about Bryan Kohberger. What is it telling us? What is it saying about Bryan Kohberger? These are some of the questions we have. And we wonder if these 4 young students, Madison Mogan, Zaina Knodel, Ethan Chapin, and Kaylee Gonsalves, if they were somehow targeted by Bryan Kohberger, because we found out from the NBC show that he had pictures of Idaho students in his phone as well as Washington State students. So were they in fact targeted by him? That's an interesting thing. And one of the most interesting things is that why did Dateline NBC get this exclusive story? Who leaked this information to Dateline NBC? Are they such good reporters and investigators that they found this out on their own? No, I don't think so. But I'm glad they did get it because it was shared with everyone else. Not at the same time, but it was shared. So we have a better insight as to who is Bryan Kohberger. What is he all about? And there's so many people out there in YouTube land that think he's innocent. And as we sift through the evidence, and as more and more evidence comes in, I'm thinking that many of these people that were on the innocence fence are now falling to the side of the potentially guilty side of that fence. And you can decide that. And in fact, you don't have to decide anything because the jury's going to decide it. And we're just watching and observing. And we are giving our expert opinion here. So, folks, hold on to your hats. Hold on to your loved ones. Hold on to your toupee. Hold on to your wig. Hold on to your cup of coffee. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. Notice I said police perspective. You're entering the off-the-cuff zone. The police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we're into the NBA and NHL playoffs, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With the largest selection of odds and everything from Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and UFC, BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joining me tonight, of course, is my sidekick, retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney, jack of all trades. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good evening. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
Mike, I'm going to have to just tell the audience we were supposed to have Dr. Joni Johnston on tonight, a brilliant, brilliant woman, a profiler, a forensic psychologist. But at the last minute, she wasn't feeling well, so she gave me a rain check and she promises to come on again. But I was really looking forward to speaking to Dr. Joni Johnston tonight. But again, if she's not feeling well, I would have rather, and she has, she's going to stay home and get to feel better. The stomach virus or food poisoning is no joke. So you need some time to get well. So, Mike, we were on this afternoon and we just scratched the surface of this. But one of the things we're finding out, new evidence revealed against Kohberger and creepy Google searches. You want to address that, his creepy Google searches, which were uncovered?
Yeah, Bill, strangely, after the homicides took place, he Googled his own name recently, trying right after that to see if there was any connection, his name was being mentioned, any sort of information from the police department, about be on the lookout for this kind of person or whatever happens to be. There's no harm in Googling your name. You might do it once a year or something like that, but he did it several times after the homicides occurred. It doesn't appear he was Googling his name anytime previous. So that's a little strange. He also was looking up information on Ted Bundy, the BTK, I'm sorry, and then also I think the BTK killer out in Kansas. He was doing that. He was looking up some very strange articles on violent criminals. Now, you may say that because he's a PhD student in a doctoral program, that may be all part of his research. But the Googling of his own name and also looking at some rather strange pornographic searches he did, it's very creepy, and it's very dominant, violent, prone kind of rape kind of porn. So it's really sad, some of the things he was doing, but it does show a mindset, about what he thinks, how much anger he has built up.
Mike, one of the things, and it came out very early on in this investigation, I'm talking about months ago, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was a theory that Bryan Kohberger was what's known as an incel. And that term refers to someone who is involuntarily celibate. In essence, when this all started, he was 27 and a half, 28 years old. He's 30 now. So think of a man that age that wants to have a relationship with a woman, but for whatever reason is incapable. So that is building up inside of him, and it's building up with anger. He's getting angrier and angrier. He's inappropriate with women. He's uncomfortable around women. But this anger forces him to the other side, the side where he wants to do something about this, perhaps to punish women. It's a psychological profile, which I am totally unqualified to give. And that's why I want to have Dr. Joni on tonight to give her opinion on this. But it makes all the sense in the world, because on his phone, he also had pictures of students. And I don't know specifically if he had pictures of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, or Zaina Knodel. But there's some thought that he was targeting Madison Mogen. So where is that coming from? That was even said by the NBC show, by Dateline NBC, that he somehow was targeting Madison Mogen. So I think, again, the prosecution has way more evidence against Bryan Kohberger than they have yet to release right now. Remember, one of the reasons none of this evidence came out till now is because of the gag order. So now that the gag order is released, the evidence is starting to trickle out. And it is, as we say, it is powerful evidence, even though it is circumstantial. And I want to pull whatever hair I have left on my head out when people say, oh, it's just circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence. Mike, you're an attorney. You explain it to them.
Yes, circumstantial evidence is evidence that a jury can look at that proves a fact at issue, like the guilt of someone or the innocence of someone, through the jury having to make a logical assumption about the meaning of a particular piece of evidence in front of them. A video of a car, like a white Hyundai Elantra, driving around the neighborhood where a homicide occurred, a white Hyundai Elantra fleeing the scene afterwards, a person buying a K-bar knife months before a homicide occurred, the medical examiner's office saying a large hunting kind of knife was used to stab somebody. Those images and that K-bar knife are examples of circumstantial evidence, because a jury would have to decide how much weight do they give it. Does it logically show that the person charged with the crime, did these steps? They're all little breadcrumbs leading to a finding that the prosecution wants you to make. And again, the defense can do the same thing with circumstantial evidence, but it's not direct evidence like a video of the actual homicide taking place, or an eyewitness or a victim talking about what they saw, what they experienced. It's all little circumstantial, little piece of evidence that leads to a conclusion, a logical conclusion.
I want to address this. Christine, is it Heege or Heege? If his Google searches make him guilty, then we are all guilty. We are doing the same with searches on him. Christine, I'm going to address that. And the way I'm going to address it is that you're making Google searches. Maybe you're even searching Ted Bundy. But was your DNA on the button of a knife sheath found next to the body of one of the victims? That ties this in all, so yes, you could argue that. Then we're all guilty for doing Google searches. But do you have a Hyundai Elantra that was seen in the vicinity of 1122 King Road 23 times? Not just seen, it was 100 meters away from 1122 King Road on 23 occasions. Did you order a K-bar knife on Amazon with a sheath and a sharpener? Were you seen driving on? Did you do recons of 1122 King Road? Did you search for Ted Bundy? Did you take a course with Catherine Ramsland? I'm not saying any of these things by itself prove this case, but Christine, I think you're getting my point. Pile these up and the evidence becomes powerful. And in the words of Matt Murphy, the Orange County, California district attorney, he says, and I'll play this later on, the evidence against Bryan Kohberger is overwhelming. This is a homicide prosecutor from California. Nina Chandro, police off the cuff, do you think it could go all the way back to childhood and somehow a female or something else triggered whatever made him have these feelings of wanting to harm females? Nina, I'm unqualified to give that diagnosis. However, I think you hit it on the head. Yes, I think he's had some severe psychological issues in dealing with women, perhaps hatred for women. I think Ethan Chapin was there. He was accidentally there. He didn't intend, he didn't know Ethan Chapin was there. And if you could call it, and I hate to use this word, collateral damage, that he happened to be there amongst these young women and he lost his life because of that. So yes, I think Bryan Kohberger has a severe woman problem, issues with women. Absolutely. Mike, your thoughts?
Bill, yeah, we opined on this 2 years ago, talking about this, like, why would he do this? You don't have to prove motive, but it would be nice to know it because it gives a context for the jury to see what was going on around the circumstance, the happening, the event, the homicide. And probably, look, people are awkward, kids are awkward, teenagers are awkward. He was on the chubbier side. He really was kind of awkward. And he probably didn't have a date or a girlfriend like in high school. He eventually loses the weight. He eventually gets fit. He tries to remake himself a little bit. He gets his master's degree. For some reason, he just cannot find himself. He may be attracted to many girls, but there's none that are attracted to him. He goes off across the country, as far, diagonally way across the country from Pennsylvania all the way to Washington, Pullman, Washington. And he's there. And, within like 2 weeks, he's at a pool party. He gets noticed for being a little strange, making people uncomfortable. At one point, I heard on the news show from MSNBC that apparently he was actually taking pictures from using his cell phone, taking pictures off his laptop of people's Facebook posts. Like if he was scrolling around looking for ladies' Facebook posts and taking pictures of them and having those pictures for him to see on his cell phone. That's a mark of, I would think, of a really sad and lonely person. And it turns out that the theory is that some of the ladies whose Facebook he went to, he visited, are connected to like Madison and Kaylee. And so therefore he may have stumbled across them, because it is kind of strange. He's in Pullman, Washington, and he's at a college full of male and female students. There's if he, I hate to use the term target, but if he wanted to kill just any lady there, he could kill someone there. There's people that he could probably follow a lot easier. But no, he went across the border about 15 miles away and went to Idaho. And therefore, he's in Moscow, Idaho, and it doesn't look like it's a random attack. This was, as we used to talk about the term reconnaissance, he reconned this place because he had his mind made up that whoever, at least one of the ladies that he wanted to kill was in that home. He probably was not thinking of killing 4, but he's definitely thinking about killing 1.
You know, Mike, people are in the chat want to know the definition of an incel. And as I understand it, it's someone, a male who is involuntarily celibate.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a psychological condition where he's angry. He's angry at females because it's almost like the guy you went to high school with that wanted to go out with girls, but was very awkward around girls, that didn't have. I remember one guy said to me one time, "I have no rap." And I thought that was so funny, but he was saying it kiddingly. You know, it actually happened to be another cop. He goes, "I have no rap." And I was like, that's pretty funny. But in this case, it's not funny. An incel, involuntarily celibate. Think of a man in his prime years that wants to go out with females and probably wants to have relations with a female. And in fact, in the Dateline NBC, there was a woman by the name of Holly who was willing to go out with him. And they exchanged numbers, and he got really crazy with her. He somehow sent a text into her phone or from her phone to his phone, and she got so spooked, she wanted nothing to do with him after that.
Yeah.
And there also, according to the Dateline NBC, there was an Asian girl, a Korean girl, that also wanted to go out with him. But when they showed, and that's the one who he allegedly broke into her apartment.
That was his office mate. Yeah.
Yes. Tell that story, Mike. Maybe that'll.
Yeah. When you're in graduate school getting a PhD and you're in a program, you're going to be doing a lot of teaching assistants, being a teaching assistant. So you'll have a class with maybe 50 or 100 students, and they'll be the professor, and they'll give a lecture, and the students will sit there and write notes. But you are going to hand out the tests. You're going to collect all the notes. You're going to, grade all the tests. And the professor has that ability to have that assistant because they're the name. They're the big professor that everybody wants to hear from around the country, and you're just a lowly TA. What they do is they give you an office. You share a tiny little office the size of a cubicle, size of a phone booth, usually with another person, at least one other person. And he was assigned an office, and he got along well with his office mate, a lady, I can't think of his name. She's Korean American. And she thought he was like a decent person. He thought he was quiet and shy, but she didn't find anything off-putting about him whatsoever. And it turns out that her key to her dorm room was missing, and then it reappeared in her desk. And she was a little strange. She was a little off-put by that, and she went to her apartment, a little graduate school apartment, and a lot of things were rearranged on her toilet. Makeup and stuff was put in a different spot. A cake was put hidden in her microwave for some reason, and things were moved around enough where she knew that somebody had been in my house, but she never connected it to the guy that she shared an office with. Strange, she actually thought that they could be friends, but it turned out, as it turned out. But that was a strange little chapter in Kohberger's one semester there at Washington University.
Absolutely. Jay Mofo, I love that name, by the way. Gifted one police off the cuff membership. Thank you very much, folks. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you could become a member of the YouTube family for Police Off the Cuff. We appreciate all of our fans, our friends, our subscribers, and it's really important to keep this show going. Anyway, folks, so yes, the psychosexual part of this, as in with most serial killers, is probably the biggest aspect of this. And as I said, we were supposed to have Dr. Joni Johnston on tonight. I was looking so forward to it, but we'll get her on again and she could explain this, because she was on other shows where she spoke about other serial killers, and it usually always comes back to a psychosexual problem that they start to kill people. And I think Bryan Kohberger, if you look at his life, where he was one time 100 pounds overweight, he had a heroin addiction, he had some severe problems, and why this manifested itself in trying to become a criminologist and sort of lionizing or admiring serial killers. I can't explain that. Mike, can you?
I've been thinking about this for 2 years. I think that somewhere along the line, he stumbled upon the subject of serial killers, and reading about it fascinated him. I think it fascinated him in a way that might be a lot more fascinating than to you and me. Maybe he himself was looking for an outlet or justification or a reason for feeling the way he did, and not maybe liking a lot of the ladies in our population. And maybe he just felt like, there's something wrong with him. I think he sees, reads books and articles and does some investigation on Rader, and you've got Ted Bundy. And maybe he feels like, you know what? There's something there. I understand them better than anybody else can understand them, because I am like them. And I think ultimately, I think he wanted to experience what the satisfaction of that, killing women and dominating them. And he wanted to feel that. And we know that both Rader and Bundy, they just didn't kill. They did a lot of other horrific things to their victims. It just goes around. A lot of it is about control and domination of that person, making them suffer, thinking, you hold their life in your hands. You decide. You are so in control. You decide when they will die. And I think he really, that seemed to perhaps satisfy him, because now he understood himself. And in a weird way, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I think looking at some of the analogies with BTK and Bundy and some other people, that's where his head was at. It was all about, he would be, if he wasn't caught, he would be another BTK killer. He'd kill once every few months, once a year. Every time he felt like he needed that rush, he would do it. And then for the rest of the year, he would be this normal college professor teaching students, but with a deep, dark secret inside.
Folks, what Professor Geary was referring to, Terry K., thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. Much appreciated. He was referring to BTK, which stands for bind, tie up, and kill. No, excuse me, bind, torture, kill.
Yeah, yes.
And that was Dennis Rader, and he was known as the BTK killer, who was another person who Kohberger admired. So it's really sort of, when you think of the psychological profile, and then, so much was said when Kohberger had that little questionnaire that he quizzed people about the crimes they would do and how they would do it, how they would get away, how they would prepare for them. I want to play this from a local news station.
It's facing trial this summer in 2822's Gianna Gali sat down with a former Luzerne County prosecutor who has made several appearances on national TV breaking down that case. She's live in the studio tonight with the latest analysis. Gianna?
Nick, this evening, Dateline aired a 2-hour special sharing new details, evidence, and video that took place before and after the murder. Former Luzerne County Assistant District Attorney Jarrett Ferrantino has extensively analyzed this case from the beginning and says it's only looking worse for the accused.
With the trial of accused killer Bryan Kohberger now just 12 weeks away, it's the crime no one can forget.
In Datelines, the terrible night on King Road, evidence appears to be stacking up against the man accused of stabbing 4 college students to death.
As the new information has come out, it's painting a dark picture of Bryan Kohberger.
Former Luzerne County Assistant District Attorney Jarrett Ferrantino has analyzed this case on many national news networks since the murder happened in 2022.
What happened in that house? Why 4 victims? Why any?
Narrated by Dateline's Keith Morrison, the special provided more insight into those questions. Investigators say Kohberger was found shopping on Amazon for a K-bar knife and sheath. It matched the same brand of sheath found in the bed of one of the victims. Home security video, exclusively obtained by Dateline near the murder scene, shows the white car investigators believe was driven by Kohberger circling the block around the time of the murders several times. And police say Kohberger searched the internet before and after the murders for information about serial killer Ted Bundy.
All of these pieces of evidence together are very, very strong. Individually, what the defense is going to try to do is knock each of them out one at a time. But you run into a brick wall here. The DNA is in.
And that DNA, Ferrantino says, will be the toughest piece of evidence for the defense to explain.
Good luck with that.
That's not all. Morrison had an exclusive interview with a woman who exchanged numbers with Kohberger at a pool party months before the killings.
It was almost overly formal. I really enjoy that activity. So, can you follow up with me about that?
She said the text message she received from him made her uncomfortable.
How will his attorneys defend Bryan Kohberger with the death penalty hanging over his head?
Prosecutors plan to seek the death penalty if Kohberger is convicted in trial. Ferrantino says nothing can change that unless Kohberger pleads guilty. At this phase, this close to trial, Ferrantino feels the defense is up against the clock.
They're running out of options.
Bryan Kohberger's trial is set to begin on August 11th. Ferrantino anticipates from now until then, both the defense and prosecution will be mentally and physically preparing for a 4 to 6 month long trial. Live in studio, Gian.
So very, very interesting. One of the things that I sort of wanted to know also was who was giving Dateline NBC this information? Was it coming from the police? There's no way they found this out by themselves. Someone obviously leaked this to them, right? So what made them the special news station that was going to be the recipient of all of this information that until this time was being kept secret? Because we all remember that there was a gag order for months, and all of the people from YouTube content creators to TV stations, all running wild with theories. Now we have some truth about what occurred. And just a couple of weeks ago was a big sort of, everyone was referring to it as smoking gun information when they found out about the orders on Amazon, the K-bar knife, the knife sheath, and the sharpener. And the same knife, again, the murder weapon was not recovered. The knife sheath was to a K-bar knife. And I'm sure the wounds that were caused, a pathologist that did the autopsy could say, yes, these wounds are consistent with that type of K-bar knife, or that Marine Corps, I guess it's an 8 or 10 inch blade. K-bar knife could or have appeared to cause these wounds.
Yeah, Bill, in the beginning, after the first couple of weeks, we got scant information, a little bit from the ME's office, things like that, not a lot. The gag order was put in place. Everybody who was in the news, content creators on YouTube, everybody was shut out. Almost nothing leaked out. We only got a little bit of information when the police executed a search warrant. We got a copy of it. Search warrant affidavit, got a copy of that. And then it was nothing for like well over a year and a half. And suddenly now, as we're getting to trial, we now have evidence coming out that has to be made public. And the prosecutor is letting the defense know when the defense tries to get stuff knocked out, the prosecution responds with affirmations in their movement papers about what they've got. And so that's like a real eye-opening treasure chest of things. But, there's still that gag order. Somehow, somewhere, Keith Morrison, who's a great reporter from MSNBC with the Dateline TV show, he's been doing that show for probably a decade. And I'm thinking that he probably has some friends who have access to some of the information or may have taken part a little bit in the investigation and made a nice little phone call to him and told him a few things. And so that's where I think experience and connections come into play, because I think he knows enough people, and maybe the producer of the show knows people because they've been doing the show for a long, long time. They're well known, really well done. I think he knows somebody, the producer knows someone. It could be in the Connecticut State Police. I'm sorry, the Idaho State Police. It could be the Washington State Police, because they may have gotten involved a little bit in it. The Washington University Police, the Moscow Police, or the FBI. But somebody has a friend somewhere on MSNBC and got that information to him, because it's fantastic information. We know it's accurate, and it's singular, and it's not out there for any other reason, like in response to some sort of defense motion. It's brand new, uncovered, and it's blockbuster information.
This was about a year and a half ago, and this is from Elizabeth Vargas. She had Orange County prosecutor Matt Murphy on, who was a brilliant prosecutor. I want you to watch this and see what he says here.
Joined by former homicide prosecutor Matt Murphy. Matt, we know that some of the victims' families do want the death penalty. These crimes were heinous. But yeah, they don't blame that. I don't blame them. But how does a prosecutor make this decision?
So a prosecutor under these circumstances will weigh the aggravating versus mitigating circumstances. It's essentially the same job that a jury will be asked to do. And this case is so overwhelmingly awful, for lack of a better term. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure within the DA's office to actually seek the death penalty on that.
And the evidence seems to be very strong. I mean, it's not circumstantial. There's DNA evidence, there's cell phone evidence, there's a lot of evidence here.
The evidence against Bryan Kohberger is overwhelming, and that actually is a factor in that decision. Essentially, when people weigh the death...
I love to play that when Matt Murphy says, and I'll play it back in a second, but when he says the evidence against Bryan Kohberger is overwhelming, because I get people every single day we do this story in the chat saying, he's innocent. He didn't do this. What do you got against him? There you have, I think, a prosecutor from Orange County, California. And as far as I know, is in homicides, he's undefeated,
Right, yes.
So saying the evidence against Bryan Kohberger is overwhelming. Let's hear him say that again.
There's a lot of evidence here.
The evidence against Bryan Kohberger is overwhelming, and that actually is a factor in that decision. Essentially, when people weigh the death penalty, elected DAs, they look for two things. They look for overwhelming evidence, absolutely no doubt of guilt, because the jury will be allowed to consider that in the penalty phase. And remember, this is a bifurcated system. So first there's the guilt trial, and then there's the penalty trial. They are allowed to consider what's called lingering doubt. So if you have a case where there's some wiggle room, or a juror might not be sure, they're allowed to consider that in imposing the death penalty. The second thing that every elected DA will consider in making a decision like this is the shocking nature of the crimes. The vast majority of cases that are eligible for the death penalty in the United States, the elected DAs don't actually seek it. In Orange County, we sought it in less than 4%. So it is...
Wow, why so seldom?
Well, for one thing, you want to be absolutely sure as a prosecutor, because you have to take the death penalty very seriously, even in a state like California, where it's essentially symbolic. It's a big deal to do it. It's also a lot more work, and it takes a lot longer. And then it faces much harsher appellate scrutiny once the conviction and the sentence is imposed.
It also affects how you pick a jury.
It absolutely does. Now, what's interesting about this is that you're entitled to what's called a death qualified jury. So they'll bring in the veneer or the jurors for the trial, and they'll all fill out questionnaires, and they will be asked about their views on the death penalty. And if they cannot follow Idaho law, which allows for the death penalty, they will be excluded for what's known as cause. So they won't actually be in the jury panel, or they shouldn't be.
So you've been in this position before as a prosecutor, a homicide prosecutor. What do you think he's going to do?
I think this one is pretty clear. My guess is he's seeking the death penalty. Now, behind the scenes, what's happening is he's probably meeting with the defense and saying, show me what you got to try to talk me out of it. In California, we call that a livesy hearing. In Idaho, I don't know what they call it, but I'm sure they're going through that process right now.
Thank you for watching.
So I love to hear Matt Murphy. I actually had him on the show a while ago. He's a brilliant prosecutor. I read his book. His book was outstanding. But you know something, they're going for the death penalty in this case, right? And one of the things that's a little bit strange is the death penalty here is a firing squad in Idaho. And there was just a firing squad the other day, and the guys who were the shooters didn't hit the guy in the heart, which would cause immediate death. Apparently he suffered for a little bit. And there's an argument against cruel and unusual punishment, which they don't want the death penalty to be whatsoever. Your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, look, I might not like the death penalty, but if you have a state that does have the death penalty, and you don't seek to use it against Bryan Kohberger, then why would you even have it? If he's convicted of killing 4 young people and you don't seek the death penalty, you're just you threaten it, but then you take a plea if they agree to some sort of plea bargain for like life behind bars. Why even have it? Because if he's not eligible or if he's not deserving of it, who is? So I can see Bill Thompson, saying, look, we have the death penalty. We're going to use it sometime, and let's use it on him. Now, when it comes to the firing squad, every single method used in the United States to put someone to death, gas, electricity, the electric chair, lethal injection, hanging, and even firing squad have been challenged, and all have been found to be not cruel and unusual, because it appears that they pretty much it's almost an instantaneous kind of death. And the Supreme Court rules that way. Back in 1878 or 1884, in a case called Wilkerson versus Utah, the United States Supreme Court said death by firing squad is not cruel and unusual. So that's been around a long, long time. And so I think probably if Kohberger is convicted and they do sentence him to death, and eventually 25 years from now, he gets a death penalty, it will be by a firing squad.
Absolutely. This is from Anganette Levy.
Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle in the early morning hours of November 22nd, 2022. Now, prosecutors have said they linked Bryan Kohberger to the murders on King Road through a single source of DNA left on a K-bar knife sheath just like this one. That DNA left on the inner snap of the knife sheath. This knife sheath, the one's very similar to this one, was left next to Maddie Mogen's body on her bed. Kohberger was taken into custody at his parents' home in Pennsylvania on December 30th, 2022. Police have revealed in hearings that he was wearing a black hoodie, and they feared he was destroying evidence. So they broke down the door of his parents' house, rushed in, and took him into custody. Police said they could see Kohberger in his parents' kitchen using a drone with a video feed. Kohberger's lawyers have said his parents were zip-tied, and Kohberger was taken into custody. And Kohberger, in his own kind of odd way, suggested to the officers that they get coffee sometime at a later date. Kohberger's lawyers have suggested that that is just one example of the way in which he lacks the ability to pick up on social cues because he has autism. But back to this new information that's come out. Kohberger was working on getting his PhD at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington. He left Pennsylvania for Washington in late June. He got his Washington driver's license on July 1st. Later in July, Bryan Kohberger went to a pool party in Moscow at the Grove Apartments. We've reported on that in the past. But Dateline reports Kohberger made some women there uncomfortable, including a married woman who had to signal to her husband to come over and intervene. A woman named Holly told Dateline that she exchanged numbers with Kohberger at that party. She said he later texted her about their shared interest in hiking. The text was oddly formal, she said. It read, "Hey, I am pretty sure we spoke about hiking trips yesterday. I really enjoyed that activity, so please let me know. Thanks." Holly told Dateline she got distracted and never responded. The following month, on August 16th, Dateline says Bryan Kohberger's cell phone records show he Googled Ted Bundy's name with a typo, and a paper written about Bundy by one of his professors entitled Ted Bundy on the Malignant Being, an Analysis of the Justificatory Discourse of a Serial Killer. Ted Bundy killed women in the 1970s. He went to college in Washington State and then moved east to Florida, killing 2 sorority sisters at the Chi Omega House in January of 1978. He was sentenced to death and executed in 1989. Ironically, Bryan Kohberger's mother had actually written to her local paper at the time opposing the death penalty for Ted Bundy, but that was before Bryan Kohberger was even born. That same day, on August 16th, Maddie Mogan had posted a photo on Instagram of her and her roommates. And that very same day, a noise complaint was called in to Moscow police for the house on King Road.
Is this your place?
Yeah.
Perfect. You know why we're here?
And I assume noise.
Noise, yeah.
Yeah.
5 days later, the night before classes started at the University of Idaho, Bryan Kohberger was pulled over less than 2 miles away from the King Road house. We've told you about that before. 5 days later, Dateline says Kohberger Googled, "When can a cop detain you?" Lately, I've been seeing some really amazing makeup trends on social media, but no matter the trend, I feel like there's always that one brand you come back to. For me, it's Thrive.
Well, I think
At
we
Thrive
gotta not
Kohberger,
watch that.
Our request is that the court not allow the state to label him in testimony as a psychopath or.
These are some of the, this case has been moving forward quite quickly. And the defense was asking that he not be allowed to be called a psychopath or a murderer or a killer. And I don't think the prosecution had any intention of using those words in describing him. And right around the same time, they came around with the autism diagnosis, the autism spectrum syndrome, which now Judge Stephen Hippler has agreed to allow the prosecution to have their own experts examine Bryan Kohberger to see if that is even a remote possibility. And that will be decided, because really what that is in reference to is in the event he gets convicted, the autism spectrum syndrome could possibly prevent him from getting the death penalty. Is that correct, Mike?
100% correct. Ann Taylor, as the defense attorney, she brought up the subject. And once she opens up the door to have the prosecutor say, wait a second, if you're going to make that an issue, then we have the opportunity. Now we have to have our own fair opportunity to have our psychiatrist take a look at him, give him an examination, and diagnose him. It won't be used at the trial. It will only be used if he's convicted and he's now in the second phase, looking at the death penalty when the prosecution and defense fight it out in front of the jury over aggravating and mitigating circumstances. And Taylor will, at that point, be able to raise the issue of some sort of diagnosis. And then Bill Thompson will be able to bring in the state's expert and argue about it, the battle of the experts in front of the jury. But it won't come in during the trial, but it will come in at the end if he's convicted.
Lisa H., recon with a question mark, reconnaissance. That's when a criminal will search the area where he's going to commit the crime, so that on the night or the morning of the crime, there'll be no surprises. Everything will go smoothly. He knows his escape routes. He knows his areas of entry and exit. So all of those things, we call it a reconnaissance. It's almost like something called countermeasures that a criminal uses to get away. So he'll do reconnaissance and countermeasures in order to defeat the police. So I hope I explained that, Lisa H. We'll go back to Anganette Levy here.
Behaved prosocially. Now, it's not clear if these searches were related to his coursework, himself, or something going on in class. Kohberger was certainly having a rough time adjusting to life at Washington State. He was a teaching assistant. And in early November, WSU faculty met with him about an improvement plan after he met a student at her car and gave her the creeps. After this, there were more visits to Moscow, with Kohberger's car pinging off the cell tower that covered the King Road house. That's something we've told you about many times, and an FBI analyst will testify that Kohberger's phone was in the area of the King Road house on 23 occasions from.
So I want to address that, because here we have an FBI analyst saying that Kohberger's phone was in the vicinity of the 1122 King Road on 23 occasions. At first, it was thought to be 12 or 13. Now it's up to 23. There was an expert that the defense had that said, oh, cell phone pinging is unreliable. Here's an FBI expert who's saying that it was, I believe, within 100 meters of 1122 King Road on 23 occasions. If they can pinpoint that down, Mike, that is very, very powerful evidence.
Yeah, because once that comes in, Ann Taylor will have to somehow defend that when she gets her own witnesses up there, if she has any, during the defense's case after the prosecution rests and the defense gets the chance to present their evidence. She would have to have someone explain, somewhere along the line, maybe Bryan Kohberger himself, although I doubt it, that he was there because he had friends in the area, maybe a block away, the next building over from them, and he was there visiting. But that would require a name, the address, the phone number, why you were there, on what dates do you claim you were there, that sort of thing. And I think at this point, at this late stage, we would have heard from Ann Taylor about that to explain away to the judge, Rader. Hippler, why he was there all those times. The fact that there hasn't been any mention of any sort of alibi, real alibi with the name and a person's name and an address and a phone number, a real person, I don't think there is anything. I don't think he has any sort of real defense to that FBI agent's testimony, except to say their own expert witness will say it's not as accurate as the FBI makes it out to be. That's the only thing they have.
Frank Nunez from the chat. Coincidence does not make you guilty. Too many what ifs. Frank, you know something? One thing is coincidence. But when you have 30, 40, 50 pieces of circumstantial evidence, it's no longer coincidence. It's called evidence. And circumstantial evidence simply means from which inferences may be drawn. And too many people poo-poo circumstantial evidence. I love saying poo-poo. They poo-poo that evidence as if it's not important. And, when they were talking to Matt Murphy about that, Elizabeth Vargas, she was incorrect because, as Professor Geary says, even DNA evidence is circumstantial. Explain that, Mike.
Yeah. Direct evidence is very few things that are considered legally direct evidence. And that is a defendant's own admissions of guilt is direct evidence of the crime. An eyewitness account who actually saw the crime take place, a witness who saw the robbery take place, the beating take place, the shooting take place, or the victim testifying that the person sitting behind the defense table, they're the person who beat me down. They robbed me, they choked me, they kneed me in the face, they punched me in the eye, that sort of thing. That is direct evidence. Everything else, fingerprints, blood found at the scene, DNA, photographs of your car in the area, having the kind of weapon that was used to kill someone or rob someone, your cell phone pinging in a particular area, on the date the location of the homicide, a threat that you made on it with a text message a week before, as circumstantial evidence of criminal mens rea. All of those little things by themselves don't mean you did the crime. Similar to like an eyewitness account, the video of you being of the perpetrator, hurting somebody. But you take all those little things, the Hyundai, the car, the balaclava, the DNA, the purchase of the K-bar, trying to delete the account, the car with one license plate, the color of the car, the pinging off cell towers 23 times. All these little things add up, and they're like a little logical, legal breadcrumb trail that the prosecutor is going to put out there and let the jurors make the logical inference that all of these things lead to the inescapable conclusion that Bryan Kohberger is the one who killed those three girls and Ethan Chapin.
100%. Folks, it's Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button. It helps us with the algorithm. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels, and we appreciate all your support. Let me go back to Ann-Gannett Levy here.
From July until November 7th, 2022, and these visits were late at night. No one has ever said whether the car stopped near the house or not. Dateline also reports that investigators found several Instagram photos of female students from Washington State University and the University of Idaho on Kohberger's phone, and that some of those students were friends of and Instagram followers of Maddie, Kaylee, and Xana. Now, when it comes to the night of the murders, Dateline revealed investigators' theory about the intended target, and they also revealed details that only the killer would know. They believe Maddie Mogan was the target, but they don't know when she could have caught Kohberger's eye. They believe she was the target since the killer went to her room, but didn't expect Kaylee Gonsalves to be there, which threw off his plan. Dateline reports that investigators believe Xana Kernodle heard the loud struggle between Kaylee and the killer and went to check it out, but then the killer chased Xana to her bedroom where she fought for her life. And then Ethan Chapin, asleep or passed out in the bed, was killed with one knife strike to an artery and his lower legs carved in some way by the killer. Dateline quotes investigative sources as saying the killer sat down in a chair in Xana's room exhausted, leaving impressions from blood on the chair before leaving the house, walking past surviving roommate DM, and speeding away, leaving the neighborhood. Later that morning, after 6 a.m., Dateline says Kohberger called a phone registered to his father 3 times, talking one time for at least 37 minutes. Then his phone showed he returned to Moscow for a time after 9 a.m., but then went home. Later that morning at 10:31 a.m., he snapped this selfie, giving a thumbs up in the bathroom mirror. We showed that photo to you nearly 2 months ago when prosecutors filed it in a motion. 3 days after the murders, Dateline reports that Kohberger Googled the University of Idaho murders for the first time and then Googled his own name. He followed news of the case, watching at least 60 items about it, including pieces on law and crime and other YouTube channels. He took more selfies in black hoodies and even watched a show in December on YouTube called Ted Bundy, The Essence of a Psychopath, and watched another show about the murders, comparing the murders to Ted Bundy with Kaylee and Maddie's photo on the thumbnail. So to talk about all of this, I want to bring in Josh Ritter. He is the host of...
Well, we're not going to talk about that, but so pretty amazing. And those photos, you know, we talked about this one, the selfie that he did, as being the equivalent of a trophy, something that a serial killer would take from a crime scene, or something he would take to try to remember that day and that event. And I find this to be the equivalent of that, of a trophy. The other thing is, I think he looks like the Grim Reaper here. Pretty disturbing photograph, if you ask me. He really looks like, you know, a pose of someone who wants to perhaps look like a serial killer, or look like another possible serial killer from the annals of crime, because this is really a spooky photograph. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, he's living in his head. He's living by himself. He's awake half the night. He doesn't have any friends. He's not close to anybody. He doesn't get invited to parties. And here he is, you know, at this point, taking that picture, especially with the black hoodie on. I've opined that he wants to look intimidating. It's not like a picture you might take of yourself with a beer, you know, at the beach in the summertime. that sort of thing where you're smiling. No, this is creepy. He wants to look creepy. He wants to look menacing. And I think he has it over his head. And I'm thinking he's probably trying to figure out how much covering his head needs in case if he attacks someone that they won't be able to really describe his face. How much covering do I need to hide, my own personal physical characteristics? And that may be part of it. That picture with him in the shower, you're right. We've seen that with Dennis Rader. He would take little pieces of jewelry and a driver's license of somebody, just something that he could remember the feeling that he felt after he did the crime and got away with it. That rush of adrenaline, knowing he did a good job and that he feels like he's safe. And it's been an exciting time, and now he can go back to being a normal person. In this case, Kohberger could go back to being a teacher assistant at Washington University. But those two pictures I think are very telling.
This is video of what is purported to be his car from a house right near 1122 King Road. You can see the car pulling in, backing out. This is without sound. It's showing him driving around in the area of 1122 King Road. Clearly, it's a white car. I can't say definitively that it's an Elantra, but clearly it's a white car. And it's, again, powerful circumstantial evidence, not, smoking gun, oh, this is it, but circumstantial evidence that piles up with the rest of the circumstantial evidence they have in order to show really his mindset and his capability, and with all of the evidence together to show that he is the person that committed this crime. This is from Ashley Banfield. I'll put this up on the screen, talking about Kohberger's phone.
I'm joined by Steve Gonzalez, father of Kaylee Gonzalez, who was one of the 4 kids murdered inside 1122 King Road. Steve, there's a lot of blockbuster revelations by NBC. One of the ones I found so upsetting was the allegation that these are pictures of University of Idaho girls on Bryan Kohberger's phone. Do you have any idea if Kaylee was among them?
I don't know. I find it very telling that there was other students that are supposed to be in their friend circles that are on that phone for sure.
And do you know anything more about what that mother, Angela Naveja's, with the daughter Ashlyn, who was best friends with Maddie? Do you know anything more about that child's story? I mean, that girl's story. Ashlyn was supposed to spend the night there. It's just so upsetting to think what happened. Why didn't she?
I don't know the details on Ashlyn. I definitely know Ashlyn. I've met and hung out with her. We've done fundraisers together, and her mother. So, yeah, I know that she spent. She used to be a roommate there. So, I'm a little surprised at how that night, but I'm not surprised that she would be over there and hanging out with the girls at all.
Boy, have you had a chance to talk with her since the revelation that she was supposed to be there and wasn't, and decided not to be?
No, and I just heard that she doesn't want to come back to Idaho, and now I've got a daughter who's going to Texas for college now, so I kind of understand how it feels for some of these side victims, that how they feel like they just don't feel safe and they want to just run, get out of the area. So her saying that is kind of rang true with our daughter.
The internet search is alleged to be, Ted Bundy and then non-consensual violent sex. You've said that this stands out because of reports before from the Reddit survey that Bryan Kohberger sent out, as a criminology student, asking other criminals about their methods. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, we got a letter and it had a phone number in there, and we called this individual, and he said he had been interviewed by Bryan, and he got the sense that Bryan was getting off on his story, and his story was basically he'd listen to a police scanner, wait for somebody to call the police on a domestic violence type thing, and then the male would be arrested, and then he would go into those neighborhoods, and that would be the house that he would rob. So he said that Bryan seemed to enjoy his story, and he said that he had he felt like he started enjoying certain aspects of his story where he would talk about drunk females passed out, and he basically said, I could have done anything. I was just going for jewelry, going for money, going for whatever he was. But Bryan would call him back repeatedly and want to know more details on that story.
It's all just so upsetting. And I know we're getting closer and closer to this trial where we will hear actual evidence as opposed to reports. Steve, thank you for that. I also want to let our audience, Steve, know that your family has to travel upwards of 8 hours to be at the trial of Bryan Kohberger, and it's expected to last for months. So, folks, a friend of the Gonzalez family has set up a GoFundMe to help them make that repeated travel. It's called Help Kaylee Gonzalez's Family Attend Trial. If you want to go there, there's the address for you. The name of the GoFundMe account is right there.
So, I always felt that Steve Gonzalez was such a really a great man. Can't imagine what it's like to lose a daughter like that. And he's been a stand-up guy, and he's been sort of the spokesperson for the families. And he still has to raise the rest of his family, work full-time, and deal with this. Can you even imagine that, Mike?
Bill, I can't. I cannot imagine trying to get by, putting one foot in front of the other every day after having lost one of my children. And so he's a great spokesman. Our hearts go out to him and the rest. But he's a great spokesman for the parents of the slain children. And, he's a person who shows a lot of strength. And I hope he does get to attend the trial as much as he possibly can, and, be there for any other of the parents who are going to go.
Yeah, it's really tragic. Oh, folks, by the way, I got rid of the person in the chat, Lemon, who was pretty destructive and pretty disruptive, I should say. Yeah. So he's banished to bogey land. I probably should have done it earlier, but he's gone now. So some of you people were arguing with him in the chat, and I don't need that in the chat. We want this to be a friendly place, a place where people respect each other and get along. I don't need someone to be someone, me, myself, and I. He's an arrogant troll. Exactly. Yeah. Pam Greenway from the chat, incels don't just want to go out with any woman. They feel they are superior and deserve whatever woman they are attracted to. And if they don't get what they want, feel entitled to punish them. That's from Pam Greenway. Lisa H., we still love you, Bill. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We always can use love. That's for sure. Let me play this from the E Network here.
Accused of fatally stabbing University of Idaho student Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin in November of 2022, was active on Google in the weeks before and after the killings, according to records from Kohberger's phone in the possession of law enforcement obtained by Dateline. In addition to searches on infamous serial killer Ted Bundy, the records indicate Kohberger made online inquiries for pornography with the words, quote, forced, passed out, drugged, and sleeping, per the phone data. But that's not the only activity discovered by law enforcement on his cell phone. In court documents, authorities said they found a selfie of Kohberger, quote, taken from his phone on November 13th, 2022, only hours after the homicides at 10:31 a.m. In the photo, which was attached to the filing, Kohberger, dressed in a button-down shirt and with Bluetooth earbuds in, stood in front of what appeared to be a shower as he smiled at the camera and held up a thumbs up. And according to the court documents, the state intends to introduce the image of Kohberger because of the witness, who was only identified as DM, says she saw a male in the student's home wearing a ski mask that only revealed his nose and eyes. She also told police she remembered his, quote, bushy eyebrows. According to docs, the state also intends to share Kohberger's driver's license, which lists him as 6 feet tall, to compare against the witness's description of, quote, male, white, skinny athletic build, a few inches taller than DM, who stands at 5'10", not someone she knew, with bushy eyebrows. The statement reads, quote, whether or not Bryan Kohberger can be described as having bushy eyebrows is a factual determination to be decided by the jury.
So these were all things that the judge absolutely is going to allow. That was the defense tried to get the term bushy eyebrows thrown out. And that was another thing that this past week or past 2 weeks that Judge Stephen Hippler ruled upon and ruled that, yes, absolutely, that can come in. That is legit. And that was her perspective, that he had bushy eyebrows. And the jury, and I'm sure Kohberger will shave his eyebrows for the trial, no doubt. His attorneys are going to make sure that he does that, so they're not bushy whatsoever. Mike?
Bill, yeah, I think that anybody who worries about the prosecution not having any real good circumstantial evidence, or having evidence that's very equivocal, don't worry about it. They have excellent. They've had excellent investigators. They've done a great job. They've been busy for 2 years. The investigation did not end with his arrest in late December 2022. It continued. And so they've got enough evidence, they believe, to convict him of the 4 murders. They're competent. They know what they're doing. And they got an excellent prosecutor. So there shouldn't be any worries. Judge Hippler is a great judge. And, Ann Taylor's an excellent defense attorney. She's tried her best. So it's going to be an excellent trial, and I hope everybody, pays attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. This is actually our second show of the day. We did an early show at 12 noon today because I was driving for 3 days coming back from Florida to New York. So we were off the air for 3 days. So I was sort of raring to get back, and luckily Mike Geary was available to do the show with me. And tonight we were actually supposed to have Dr. Joni Johnson on, and at the last minute she didn't feel well. So I'm going to try to book her sometimes either this week or next week, pending her feeling better. Anyway, Mike, your final thoughts?
That we have a good group of people here. I've been looking at the chat the whole time. They're excellent questions, and I just want to shout out to Lisa H. and Annabelle for your super stickers. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching the show. For appreciating the product that Bill puts out every opportunity he can. So please stay tuned and stay with Police Off the Cuff.
Thanks, Mike. And guys, as we get new information, as the case moves forward, and other cases, we'll bring you the best from true crime from a police perspective. Police Off the Cuff. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.